June 24th, 1944, 05:47 hours. Normandy dawn had not yet fully broken over the countryside, and the world remained trapped between darkness and light. Sergeant William Chandler lay motionless in the loft of a crumbling stone barn, its slate roof half collapsed from artillery blasts that had thundered across this land for the past several weeks. He was precisely 2 kilometers from the German lines, but distance meant little now. War had turned land into geometry and men into coordinates. Beside him rested his weapon, his companion, his secret. The Lee-Enfield No. 4, Mark I. It lay cradled in the straw, oiled and immaculate despite the grime of battle. It smelled faintly of walnut wood, gunmetal, and that unmistakable blend of cordite and wet earth that seemed to cling to everything in Normandy. Even the air tasted metallic. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning mist drifted lazily across the fields, blurring hedgerows and shattered fences. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tower rose like a broken finger, silhouetted against the grey sky. That was the target. That was where the German sniper had set up. Chandler had studied that tower for the last half hour, memorizing its angles, its line of sight, its fatal intent. Now it was time. Next to him, Corporal Thomas Davies, spotter, friend, and occasional conscience steadying his binoculars, squinted into the haze. His voice was low, calm, almost reverent, as though speaking too loudly would shift the balance of fate. Winds about 4 miles per hour. Left to right. She's steady. Chandler exhaled slowly, sinking deeper into his rifle. His cheek pressed against the worn stock, his right eye aligning perfectly with the scope. The crosshairs floated gently across the church's narrow window slit, where he could just make out the distinct shape of a helmet. Not moving, not hiding, watching. He knew this moment intimately. He had lived it over and over, replaying every variable. The humidity, the weight of his heartbeat, the small tremor in his left index finger that always appeared just before the first shot. He felt a strange calm, a stillness. He placed his finger on the trigger, and then he felt it. He knew every ounce, every grain of pressure needed to fire this rifle. He had fired it hundreds of times in training, dozens of times since landing in Normandy. But now something was different. The trigger broke at 4 pounds instead of 8. His mind flickered, just faintly, just once. And then instinct took over. First shot. A soft crack, less dramatic than the movies ever portrayed. Through the scope, he witnessed it. The German sniper's helmet snapping back sharply, body crumpling into the shadowed interior. Gone. Davies didn't flinch. Clean hit. He's down. Barely 3 seconds passed. Movement 620 yards out between hedgerows. Another figure, crouching, sprinting, diving for foliage. Chandler didn't hesitate. Slight elevation adjustment. Wind correction. Breath in. Half breath out. Second trigger break. Another clean strike. The figure collapsed mid-stride, limbs folding unnaturally. Davies blinked, disbelief creeping in. Bloody hell. But Chandler was already tracking the third. 530 yards. Another silhouette. He moved with mechanical precision, adjusting for angle, compensating for shallow fog distortion, knowing exactly how the barrel harmonics would behave. Third shot. Another hit. 1 round, 1 life. One more stillness. 3 kills. 3 shots. 90 seconds. Davies lowered his binoculars, staring at Chandler like he was looking at something different. Not just a marksman. Not just a soldier. There was something else now, something unspoken, sharp, and dangerous. What the hell did you do to that rifle? Chandler didn't answer. He simply opened the bolt with a crisp metallic click. The empty brass case jumped from the chamber, spinning in the air before landing among the straw. He slid a fresh round in, calm, mechanical, composed. He didn't look at Davies. He didn't look at the bodies. He just kept aiming. Outside, the mist was beginning to lift. Sunlight touched the steeple of the church where the sniper had fallen moments before, casting long shadows over the ancient stone. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the silence of held breath, of inevitability. Davies still watched him, waiting, pale. He finally said it again, quieter this time. "Will, what did you do?" Chandler said nothing. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what he had done. In Normandy, the fighting was unlike anything taught on training ranges or described in manuals. The hedgerows, ancient earthen barriers, sometimes 8 feet tall and thick with roots, brambles, and dense undergrowth turned every field into a fortress and every lane into an ambush zone. Visibility was limited. Sound bounced unpredictably. Enemy positions could be 20 yards away or 200 and still invisible. It was the perfect environment for snipers, but only the ones with the right tools. Normandy hedgerow fighting began on June 6, 1944. The British 3rd Infantry Division deployed sniper sections, each made up of 2-man teams, 1 shooter, 1 spotter. They were equipped with Lee-Enfield No. 4 Mark I rifles fitted with No. 32 Mark I telescopic sights. The rifle was famous 10-round magazine, 0.303 British caliber, quick bolt action, rugged construction, and exceptional reliability. It had served across 2 continents and through 2 world wars. It had history, respect, and performance. But it had a flaw. A small flaw. A flaw buried within its very trigger, unseen by anyone who didn't feel it through their fingertip. Trigger creep. The standard military configuration of the Lee-Enfield required an 8-pound trigger pull weight with 3 to 4 millimeters of creep before the sear released. That meant that before the rifle actually fired, the trigger would travel a short, mushy distance, unpredictable and inconsistent. Before braking, at 200 yards, the typical range for infantry, the error caused by trigger creep was acceptable. Minute of man, they would say. At normal battle distances, precision was not perfection. But snipers were not normal riflemen. At 400 to 600 yards, the typical sniper engagement distances in Normandy, those tiny inconsistencies weren't tiny anymore. That slight unpredictability sent bullets 6 to 8 inches off target, not inches that could be dismissed as battlefield chaos. Inches that meant the difference between neutralizing an enemy sniper or dying from his return fire. By June 20th, 1944, the 3rd Infantry Division had lost 11 snipers killed and 6 wounded in just 14 days, a 31% casualty rate in less than a month. Not because they lacked skill, courage, or discipline, but because their rifles betrayed them at the moment they needed absolute precision. At those distances, the German snipers had every advantage. Their Karabiner 98Ks rifles, Kar98ks, as the soldiers called them, featured cleaner, smoother, more consistent triggers. They had a pull weight of just 3 to 4 pounds and nearly 0 creep. German snipers could break their shots cleanly, predictably, accurately. They trained for one-shot engagements, first-round hits, which meant the enemy never had the chance to fire back. The British were not so lucky. Their pattern was painfully clear. The British sniper settled behind his scope, aligned his crosshairs, controlled his breathing, and pressed the trigger. The rifle crept, shifted, threw the bullet off target. The German sniper, alerted by the shot, triangulated the sound, located the muzzle flash or disturbance from the hedgerow, and returned fire. The British sniper died. Their rifles were reliable, but reliability was not the same as precision. German after-action reports noted British marksmanship as hesitant and second-shot dependent. British reports were more direct. One fictional but period-accurate remark read, "Our lads have the better rifle in every respect except one. Their triggers are getting them killed." That was the truth, in its cruelest form. British armourers at battalion level tried to address the problem, but military regulations were strict. Standard service triggers could not be modified in the field. The rifle had to remain within issued specifications. Any adjustment that changed trigger weight or travel was considered unauthorized modification, a court-martial offense. There was to be no tampering with the weapons fire control group. Doctrine assumed that soldiers were too untrained, too inexperienced, or too reckless to modify their own weapons. But doctrine did not kneel behind a rifle in mud, sweat, and blood, staring down 500 yards at a church tower slit where a German sniper waited patiently. Doctrine did not die from a trigger's hesitation. By late June, the whispers had begun. British snipers were quietly filing down sears, polishing trigger surfaces, replacing springs with liberated German parts from captured Kar-98 rifles. Accidental refinements, they called them. Found improvements. Nothing official, nothing spoken aloud, but everything understood. But Sergeant William Chandler did more than whisper. He studied the trigger, tested its tolerances, measured its weights. He didn't alter it randomly. He engineered it. He tuned it to perfection, not 3 pounds like the German trigger, but exactly 4 pounds, with a crisp break and near zero creep, a balance between reliability and precision. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He didn't remove safety. He didn't weaken parts. He simply made the rifle honest. Honest to his finger. Honest to the shot. Honest to the consequences. He knew what he had done. He knew the risk. He knew the gain. And 24 hours later, on June 24th, 1944, at 05:47 hours, 3 German snipers died in 90 seconds, because perfection had finally met opportunity. And it made no sound, except one clean break. Who was Sergeant William Chandler? He was 34 years old, from Birmingham, not the elegant postcard version, but the industrial heart of the city where soot-stained brick and steel shaped lives. Before the war, he had not been a soldier. He had not even been particularly interested in military service. He had been a craftsman, a gunsmith. Not just any gunsmith. He worked for Holland & Holland, one of Britain's most prestigious gunmakers. The kind of establishment where aristocrats and marksmen ordered bespoke rifles and expected perfection. He built rifles for Bisley competitors, men and women who trusted engineering more than luck. They expected a trigger to break precisely. No creep, no hesitation, no uncertainty. And Chandler delivered. He understood triggers the way a watchmaker understands gears, intimately, instinctively, beautifully. He knew that a trigger was not simply a lever, it was the conductor of accuracy. If it broke too early, shots strayed. If it broke too late, it introduced movement. If it crept 3 millimeters, 2 millimeters, even 1, then accuracy was no longer precision. It was guesswork. He competed at Bisley himself. 1938, King's Prize competition. He finished 14th. Not first, not second, not even in the top 10 yet among riflemen. That ranking meant something. It was an affirmation not just of skill, but of control. He could shoot, but more importantly, he understood why he could shoot. Then came September of 1939, when Europe tipped into chaos and Britain answered. Chandler enlisted, not because he felt heroic, but because he felt responsible. He believed that if rifles were going to decide lives, someone who understood rifles should be present. He was assigned to the infantry at first. It felt wrong, like sending a surgeon to carry stretchers. But he did his duty. He marched. He dug. He fired the same Lee-Enfield rifle issued to everyone else. But in 1942, when sniper training selections were made, his target records stood out. His groupings were tight, his judgment steady, his patience exceptional. But his true distinction lay in his relationship with the rifle. He didn't simply fire weapons, he evaluated them. He adjusted sling tension, he measured bolt play, he checked bedding pressure. He could tell how a rifle would shoot before he ever looked through the scope. By June 8, 1944, he was in Normandy with the 2nd Battalion, East Yorkshire Regiment. He did not speak much, but every man in his section trusted his judgment, especially when it came to rifles. While most snipers cleaned their weapons regularly, Chandler treated his rifle like a living thing. His bore was cleaned daily. His headspace checked weekly. His number 32, Mark I telescopic sight was re-zeroed every morning, before breakfast, before orders. He carried strips of flannelette cloth in his pocket to clean the chamber. He wiped condensation from the glass every hour in the misty Normandy mornings. His rifle was perfect, except for one thing: the trigger. Even with immaculate maintenance, even with flawless barrel harmonics and optics alignment, that single imperfect component ruined purity. The trigger crept just like every other Lee-Enfield trigger. That creeping pull ruined the stillness of the shot. That creeping pull meant that when his mind and body were ready, the rifle was not. He felt it every time he squeezed. Every time his fingertip moved, wanting the break, and instead it got hesitation, uncertainty, interference. Other snipers blamed themselves for bad shots. Chandler blamed the equipment. He had something in his kit that most snipers did not: a small jeweler's file. He used it the way he had in his gunsmithing days to deburr brass cases. Smooth, jagged edges on buckles. Shave away imperfections left by rushed wartime manufacturing. It was light, small, efficient, and dangerous, because a skilled hand could use it to change more than just metal edges. He had looked at that file for 3 weeks. He knew exactly what it could do to a trigger mechanism. He could polish the sear, reduce the creep, change the pull weight from 8 pounds to 4, make the break clean, honest, reliable. But it was illegal. Field modification of service, weapons, especially fire control components, was forbidden. It wasn't a minor rule, it was a court-martial offense. A violation of military engineering standards that could cost him rank, freedom, or even expulsion from service. He knew the consequences, but he also knew the reality. A rifle that hesitated got a soldier killed. A trigger that crept was not just a flaw, it was a liability. And in Normandy, liabilities didn't go unnoticed. In the right moment, with the right silence, holding the right tool, William Chandler realized something. He wasn't just able to make the rifle better, he was obligated to. Even if no one would ever thank him, even if no one would ever know, even if it would be called a crime. In war, men die. But for Sergeant William Chandler, these deaths were not just casualties. They were preventable. They were mechanical failures disguised as fate. The deaths came one after another. 4 snipers, in 3 weeks, 4 good men, all skilled, all disciplined, all betrayed by the same fault, a trigger that hesitated when it mattered most. Death. Number 1. Sergeant Thomas Whitfield. June 9th. Thomas Whitfield was 26 years old, from Liverpool. Before the war, he had worked the docks, loading freighters and fueling ships. He was a big man with quiet hands, hands that handled rifles with surprising grace. He spotted a German sniper at 480 yards, nestled in a slit trench beneath an oak tree. Whitfield aligned his sights, controlled his breathing, and pressed the trigger. 7 inches left. The shot landed harmlessly in the grass. Trigger creep had stolen his moment. 4 seconds later, the German responded. Whitfield was hit in the throat. He died in 90 seconds. Chandler was 400 yards away, watching through his spotting scope. He saw the miss. He saw the German's muzzle flash. He saw Whitfield stumble backward, clutching at his neck, blood pouring through his fingers. There were no last words. Just a body in the grass. Death. Number 2. Corporal James Pritchard. June 13th. James Pritchard was 22, from the Welsh valleys, the son of a coal miner. He had been wiry, cheerful, and always cold, no matter the weather. He could spot a target faster than anyone else in the platoon. He engaged a German sniper positioned in a farmhouse window at 520 yards. His first round didn't even make it past the wooden frame. It veered right, dragged off course by that familiar, hated trigger creep. He tried to chamber a second round, but the German was faster. A 7.92mm Mauser round struck him clean through the left eye. He died before he hit the ground. That evening, his spotter found Chandler and said softly. He knew he was pulling the trigger, said it felt like pulling a bloody rope. Death. Number 3. Lance Corporal David Morrison. June 17th. David Morrison was 29, from the Scottish Highlands. He had been a gamekeeper before the war, accustomed to stalking deer across rugged terrain. His instincts were impeccable, his patience legendary. He spotted a concealed German sniper at 550 yards during an early morning mist. He took his shot, low, just low. The trigger had broken late. His rifle dipped as the shot released. He immediately chambered a second round, adjusting his aim. He never got to fire it. The German shot him in the chest high, center. Chandler visited him in the aid station before he died. Morrison's voice was weak, but steady. "I knew where to aim," he whispered. "The rifle wouldn't let me shoot straight." He died during surgery. Death number 4. Sergeant Peter Hammond. June 20th. Peter Hammond was 31, a veteran, and the second best sniper in the platoon after Chandler. He had 8 confirmed kills and the calm demeanor of a man who understood his craft. He engaged a German sniper at 610 yards, an ambitious shot, pushing the limits of the rifle's effective range. He took his time. He calculated the wind. He squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide. Trigger creep. And wind. He chambered again. He almost fired. But the German did first. Hammond was hit in the shoulder. He lived, but he would never fire a rifle again. Before the medics took him, he grabbed Chandler's sleeve. "The trigger's wrong, Bill. You know it. I know it. Someone needs to fix it." Chandler's reckoning. 4 men, in 3 weeks. 4 missed first shots. All because the rifle hesitated when the marksman did not. It was not chance. It was not training. It was not fate. It was design failure. On June 21st, Chandler sat alone in his foxhole, disassembling his rifle. Not to clean it. He had cleaned it already. He simply stared at the trigger mechanism, the worn sear surfaces, the rough machine marks, the excessive first-stage travel. He pressed the trigger slowly. It crept. It dragged. It lied. He could feel the kill in its hesitation. On June 22nd, he sharpened his jeweler's file. He did not file anything that day. He only held it, turned it, weighed it in his palm. By nightfall, he knew the truth. The file was not a violation, it was a solution. Regulations be damned. Some rules protected lives, others cost them. Chandler chose which ones to follow. The next morning, he went to work. Not as a soldier, but as a gunsmith. And in that moment, the war changed, perhaps only by ounces of trigger weight, by millimeters of steel. But in war, sometimes, that is enough. June 23rd, 1944. 2200 hours. The ruined farmhouse sat on the edge of an abandoned orchard, its roof half gone, its windows shattered, its walls pocked with shrapnel scars that looked like clustered moons in the candlelight. Below it, hidden beneath loose floorboards and broken stone, was a small cellar. That was where Sergeant William Chandler worked. Only one candle lit the room. Its flickering light cast moving shadows across the walls, dancing over dust, over brick, over steel. On a clean cloth before him lay the disassembled parts of his Lee-Enfield, No. 4, Mark I. Every screw, every pin, every spring, laid out not randomly but in precise order left to right, front to back, an old gunsmith's habit he had never abandoned. Corporal Davies, his spotter, stood guard at the top of the cellar stairs, listening for footsteps, patrols, inspections, anything that could expose what Chandler was doing. What he was doing was illegal. Step 1. Disassembly 8 minutes. Chandler removed the bolt first. Smooth movement, familiar. He had done this hundreds of times, thousands perhaps. Next came the trigger guard. Trigger blade. Sear. Sear. Spring. Trigger spring. He removed the sear pin slowly, sliding it out like one would remove a watch gear. He laid each part down in the exact order of removal. A ritual, a discipline. His breathing remained slow, steady. Step 2. Inspection, 5 minutes. He brought the sear close to the candle flame, turning it gently to examine the engagement surface, the precise plane where metal met metal to determine when the rifle fired. Factory sear angle, approximately 23 degrees. That was standard, safe, reliable, and inaccurate. Worse than the angle was the roughness. The stamped metal surface bore machining scars, tiny ridges, jagged imperfections. Every millimeter of that roughness created friction. Friction meant resistance. Resistance meant creep. Creep meant death. Step 3. Reprofiling the sear. 22 minutes, Chandler took out the jeweler's file. He held the sear between thumb and forefinger, feeling its edges, orienting the steel in the candlelight. He angled the file and began. Slow strokes, same pressure, always flat. He removed approximately 0.3 millimeters of metal. No more, no less. 23 degrees became 20 degrees. 3 degrees. That was the difference between hesitation and precision. Between a delayed break and a perfect snap. Between a warning and a kill. He assembled the trigger group and tried it. Still too much creep. He disassembled. Filed again. He worked slowly, meticulously, knowing that one stroke too many could produce a hair-trigger weapon. Too light, too dangerous, too unstable. He had done this 1,000 times at Holland and Holland. This was not guesswork. This was skill. After the third assembly and dry fire test, the trigger broke clean. No hesitation, no drag. Controlled pressure, then an honest snap. 4 pounds, half the original weight. Perfect. Step 4. Spring adjustment. 6 minutes, he examined the trigger spring. Too much tension would ruin the work. Too little would make it unsafe. He clipped 1 1/2 coils. Not 2. Not 1. He flattened the cut edge with the file, protecting the spring from future fractures. He reinstalled it. Then, he pressed the trigger again. Break. Perfect reset. Safe engagement. Step 5. Reassembly and testing 6 minutes. He reassembled the rifle in complete silence. The bolt locked smoothly. He positioned the rifle on a sandbag, aimed at a dark corner of the cellar. Dry fire. Click. Clean break. 20 repetitions, one after another. No creep. No grit. No hesitation. Just a controlled squeeze and then release. 4 pounds. 4 pounds of truth. Total time. 47 minutes. Chandler exhaled. He sat back, staring not at the rifle, but at the candlelight dancing across the wooden stock. It looked no different than before. No one would notice. But he would. Every time his finger touched that trigger, he would know. His rifle was finally honest. The risk, if discovered, court-martial, dishonorable discharge, possibly prison. If the trigger failed in combat, accidental discharge. Could kill a friendly soldier. If the sear engagement was too shallow, the rifle could fire when dropped or jarred. He knew all of this, but he also knew something else. Regulations didn't understand the hedgerows. Regulations didn't watch men die because their trigger hesitated. Regulations didn't hold a dying sniper's hand while he whispered, "I knew where to aim." The rifle wouldn't let me shoot straight. Chandler wrapped the rifle gently in cloth, hid the jeweler's file under a loose stone in the cellar wall, and climbed the stairs. Corporal Davies looked at him. "Did you do it?" Chandler didn't look back. He just said, quietly, "Dawn patrol. We'll see if it works." Neither man slept that night. June 24th, 1944, 05:30 hours. The air in Normandy hung still and cold, the kind of damp that seeped through wool and bone. Sergeant William Chandler and Corporal Davies moved silently through the collapsed barn, boots finding wooden beams and avoiding loose straw. They had reached the loft well before dawn, giving themselves time to settle in, study the fields, and wait. Their position sat roughly 2 kilometers from the German front line, a vantage over an intersecting crossroads, behind which stood a lonely stone church with a crumbling bell tower. Intelligence had been clear there was a German sniper operating from that tower. He had already killed 2 British officers in the last 48 hours. Chandler took his time building the firing position. Sandbags arranged for height, rifle laid in gently. The Lee-Enfield No. 4T looked as ordinary as any other sniper rifle, but he knew better. Inside, it was different. It was his, and now it was perfect. He chambered a round. His finger rested on the trigger. For the first time, he felt the difference under the conditions that mattered. No slack. No long, dragging pulse of resistance. No heavy wall of pressure. The blade seemed to float, ready, precise, waiting for intention. It felt almost too light, too responsive, too unforgiving. He suddenly wondered, what if he had ruined it? What if it discharged accidentally? What if it misfired? What if, after all these years, 6 years since he had last touched professional gunsmith tools at Holland & Holland, his instincts had betrayed him? Davies scanned the horizon. 5 minutes to first light, he whispered. At 0 to 5:47 hours, the silhouette appeared, exactly where expected bell tower window, second opening from the left. Contact, Davies murmured. Bell tower. Range 580. Chandler didn't look away from the scope. Wind, 4 miles per hour, left to right. Hold 8 inches into the wind, just above center mass. The German stood in profile, scanning with binoculars. Most men hesitated before the first shot of the day. Chandler didn't feel hesitation. He felt clarity. He placed his finger on the trigger and began to squeeze. There was no squeeze. There was only intention and then shot. He hardly felt the break. It was instantaneous, crisp, clean, the rifle firing, exactly at the moment his breathing paused. In the scope, he saw the German's helmet snap backward, body folding and disappearing into shadow. No follow-up shot needed. He cycled the bolt. Clean. Smooth. No resistance. At 0 to 5:52 hours, Davies spotted movement southeast. A German infantryman darted through hedgerows, 620 yards, possibly a spotter or replacement sniper. Chandler shifted. Leading target. Same wind, similar distance. Again, no build-up of resistance in his finger, just contact, then break, second shot, second hit. The German crumpled and vanished into long grass. By the third engagement, at 0 to 6, 0 to 4 hours, Chandler's heart rate was steady, no tremor, no hesitation. Another German sniper emerged, carabiner with scope, moving across the ruins of a farmhouse 530 yards away. Likely looking for the same tower Chandler had silenced. Crosshairs. Breath. Pressure. Clean break. 3 hits. 0 misses. 90 seconds of cumulative engagement. He didn't say anything. Neither did Davies. Chandler didn't smile. He didn't show satisfaction. But he knew. The modification wasn't just successful. It had changed everything. Not just the weight of the trigger, not just the feel. It changed timing, rhythm, decisiveness. It removed hesitation. It let skill exist without mechanical interference. It had given him exactly what he had hoped for, connection between intent and bullet. Later, Chandler would learn the full consequences of that morning. 7 British snipers, positioned in adjacent Overwatch sites, had witnessed all 3 shots from their spotting scopes. Men who knew Chandler's reputation, not bad, not brilliant, just consistently solid, watched through glass as he scored 3 first-round hits in less than half the time it normally took to engage a single target. They weren't jealous. They weren't suspicious. 30 hours. 3 of them approached the barn. Quietly, respectfully, almost reverently. Sergeant Martin Cole, oldest of them, face lined from 6 years in service, looked at Chandler's rifle as if seeing something holy. "What did you do to your rifle?" Chandler hesitated. Regulations, discipline, consequences, all flooded his thoughts. Davies answered first. He fixed the bloody trigger. They all knew what that meant. And none of them disapproved. Word travelled faster than anyone expected. On June 24, 1944, Just hours after his remarkable three-shot engagement, Sergeant William Chandler found himself surrounded not by officers or investigators, but by snipers. Men who had watched, heard, or simply felt that something had shifted in the way war was being fought. Chandler hadn't meant to become a teacher, but by late afternoon, 3 British snipers stood with him in the farmhouse cellar, examining his disassembled trigger assembly. The candle burned low, smoke drifting across the bolt and sear. He explained the changes cautiously. The 3-degree alteration to the sear angle, the slight reduction of spring tension, how removing too much metal was worse than doing nothing, how triggers could become dangerously light firing when jarred, or worse, firing before the shooter intended. He repeated the same warning each time. "This is a court-martial offence. Don't tell anyone I taught you." Sergeant Martin Cole had only shrugged. "I'll take a court-martial over dying because my trigger's rubbish." That night, 3 snipers modified their own rifles under Chandler's supervision. He corrected technique, adjusted angles, and prevented one dangerous overfiled sear from becoming a fatal accident. Each man left with a rifle that broke clean, crisp, and predictable, exactly as a sniper's tool should. Between June 26th and 28th, the results began to appear not in conversations, but in statistics, reports, rumours, whispered across hedgerows. First shot hit rates weren't just improving, they were transforming. 3 more snipers approached Chandler, quietly, respectfully, asking if it was true, if it was possible. He soon realized a truth. He could not modify every rifle himself. So he began teaching, not just doing. He crafted informal instructions, passed verbally from one sniper to another, like a secret code. Remove metal slowly. Test frequently. Err on the side of caution. If it feels too light, it is too light. And more importantly, respect the weapon. It remembers every mistake you make. By June 29th, the modification had crossed regimental lines. A Canadian sniper Sergeant James MacDonald of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division learned the technique directly from Sergeant Cole and adapted it for his men. The method crossed not by documents, but by dialogue. No paper, no diagrams, nothing to confiscate, nothing to trace. By July 5th, 32 snipers, British, Canadian, and Polish, had altered their triggers. They didn't call it Chandler's trick, they called it the clean break. The results were undeniable. In the 23 days before the modification began, June 1st to June 23rd, snipers from the British 3rd Division recorded 89 confirmed kills and 17 casualties, a hit-to-loss ratio of 5.2 to 1. But from June 24th to July 10th, the period during which the clean break spread, those numbers changed dramatically. 147 confirmed kills, only 6 casualties, a ratio of 24.5 to 1. First shot hit probability at 500 yards rose from 61% to 89%. Average shots per kill dropped from 2.8 to 1.3. German sniper effectiveness in modified trigger sectors was reduced by 40%. The numbers were reported, but not explained. Command assumed better training, better equipment, improved morale, or luck. No one suspected that what had changed was not strategy, doctrine, or leadership. It was 3 degrees of metal. The clean break travelled like contraband through whispers, shared files, and trust. Snipers from neighbouring sectors visited under friendly pretenses, then left with new knowledge and a borrowed tool. The humble jeweler's file became valuable, more valuable than rations, cigarettes, or even field glasses. Some began trading for them. Others began hoarding them. No one wrote anything down. No one dared. If command found out, there would be consequences not just for Chandler, but for anyone who had acted on his teaching. But the snipers understood something the bureaucracy did not. The rifle was not just a weapon. It was an instrument. And an instrument played better when tuned. Gunsmiths, once ignored or seen as oddities among infantry, became sought after. Men who previously sharpened bayonets and Scraped mud from rifle stocks were suddenly gathering in dim barns, discussing sear angles, engagement depths, pressure curves, and brake characteristics. It was not just mechanical, it was cultural. It was a philosophy. One sniper described it perfectly. The trigger should not fight you, it should listen to you. Chandler never declared himself the founder of anything. He never claimed credit. But every time he watched another sniper return from mission with quiet confidence, knowing that their rifle had obeyed them, not resisted them, he allowed himself a private thought. Sometimes, the smallest change makes the biggest difference. Not in theory, not in headquarters, but on cold mornings, in fields of mud, when history pauses for exactly one heartbeat and waits for a trigger to break. By early July 1944, the Germans could feel it. Something had changed. Their snipers were seasoned, precise, and disciplined. Front, where distances were long and mistakes were short-lived. But now, facing British snipers in the bocage country of Normandy, they were encountering something unfamiliar: British accuracy. Not just decent shooting, not luck, but consistent, first-shot precision. Obergefreiter Klaus Dietrich noticed it first. Dietrich was an experienced sniper, credited with 47 confirmed kills, a veteran of Stalingrad, Kursk, and Sicily. On July 2nd, he survived a narrow engagement near Caen. His spotter had barely detected a faint muzzle flash, one shot, and the dirt beside Dietrich's face exploded. He pulled back, shaken, alive only because of a slight miscalculation in wind by the British shooter. In his after-action report, he wrote, "British sniper achieved first-round hit at approximately 540 meters. Previous engagements required them 2 to 3 shots before correction. Accuracy has improved significantly." Meanwhile, German intelligence began seeing numbers that mattered. In June, British snipers averaged 2.6 shots per kill. German analysts knew these figures well. They relied on them when planning counter-sniper maneuvers. It meant they typically had time after the first missed shot. They could move, spot, and retaliate. But now, in the first week of July, that ratio had shifted. British snipers were averaging 1.4 shots per kill. Something had changed suddenly, decisively, and without warning. German analysts met at a field command post near Saint-Lô to discuss possibilities. Theories emerged. Had the British received new scopes? Better ammunition? Had they been issued new rifles? Or had they perhaps adopted German techniques? They examined every captured Lee-Enfield rifle they could find. Most appeared standard. The same rugged design, the familiar 10-round magazine, the same, 32 scopes. Nothing looked different externally. They did not think to check the trigger. German sniper. Doctrine shifted accordingly. Units were ordered to engage at longer distances, 650 meters or more, hoping to outrange the British. They were told to reduce exposure time, never firing from the same position twice. Dummy helmets and decoy rifles were placed behind walls, in church towers, and beside logs. Firing ports were cut smaller, narrower, just enough for a scope, barely enough for a shot. But fear had crept into German sniper units, not fear of death, but fear of being outshot. British snipers now had initiative. The psychological shift was evident. German snipers became more cautious, more defensive. They fired fewer shots, changed positions more frequently, and avoided riskier opportunities. British sniper teams noticed. Their spotters reported longer delays between enemy shots, erratic relocations, and occasional silence where once there had been aggressive counterfire. The Germans were adapting, but they were not winning. Then, everything changed on July 8th. British sniper Lance Corporal Timothy Brooks was killed during a counter-sniper duel near Tilly-sur-Seulles. His position was overrun, and his Lee-Enfield rifle was recovered in nearly pristine condition. The German armourer, assigned to inspect it, Unteroffizier Martin Fiedler, noticed something curious. The trigger felt wrong. Not faulty, not damaged, different. It broke cleanly, unnaturally so. Fiedler disassembled the trigger group. Inside, he saw what most would have missed. The sear face had been filed not by accident, but by precision. The engagement angle was altered. The spring clips were shortened. The break weight was lighter, cleaner. Fiedler wrote in his technical report, "British snipers, modifying trigger mechanisms in field. Modification improves accuracy. Possibly done individually, not factory issue." The report was sent up the chain of command. Finally, the Germans understood. They issued an advisory to all sniper units. British snipers were modifying trigger assemblies to improve first-shot precision. Command recommended caution, but offered no direct countermeasure. They suggested better camouflage, faster relocation, longer-range engagement. But they could not reverse the effect. The Germans could not modify their own triggers to match because their Kar98ks rifles already had superb triggers. The British had not surpassed German trigger quality, they had merely equalized it. The Germans' advantage had not been reversed. It had been erased. From that moment on, German snipers no longer spoke of British shooters as amateurs who could be outlasted. They spoke of them as equals. And some, quietly, even spoke of respect. By mid-July, 1944, the British Army had a problem one born not from failure, but from success. On July 12th, a routine inspection was being conducted at the headquarters of the 3rd Infantry Division. The task fell to Captain Geoffrey Winters of the Royal Army, Ordnance Corps. A meticulous officer, known for strict adherence to standards, he was responsible for ensuring all service rifles complied with King's regulations, which meant checking everything from barrel condition to trigger pull weight. That morning, he tested a Lee-Enfield sniper rifle from a forward platoon. He expected the usual 8-pound trigger pull. Instead, it broke at roughly 4 pounds clean, crisp, with no creep. That wasn't possible. Winters frowned, tested it again, then disassembled the trigger mechanism on his workbench. Under magnified inspection, he found it. The sear had been reprofiled. The engagement surface was polished, beveled differently. This rifle had been deliberately modified. He called for more rifles. 5 more Lee-Enfield sniper rifles were brought from the same unit. 3 had modified triggers. That was no accident. Winters' first thought was regulation violation. His second thought, the unsettling one, was that this wasn't an accident, isolated case. Someone had been doing this intentionally. Someone knew what they were doing. He reported immediately to Major Harrison, the battalion commander, placing 3 rifles on his desk. "These rifles have been illegally modified," Winters said. "This is a direct violation of King's regulations. Section 4, paragraph 9. Unauthorized alteration of service weapons is a court-martial offense." Harrison listened, but his expression was unreadable. Then Winters added, almost reluctantly, "But the work is expertly done. These triggers are better than anything we issue from factory stock." Harrison asked a single question. "Are these rifles unsafe?" "No," Winters admitted. "If anything, they're more precise." That was the beginning of a dilemma. Officially, unauthorized modifications meant disciplinary action, possible imprisonment, or dishonorable discharge. The rules existed for safety and unity. Rifles had to operate within predictable standards. But here was another truth, staring British command in the face. These modifications were saving lives. Major Harrison ordered a deeper investigation, but quietly. On July 13th, he began interviewing snipers. Most of them admitted to using modified triggers, but none disclosed who started it. Some said nothing. Others simply stated, "It helped us get the first shot off right." Still, others said, "It kept us alive." But what struck Harrison most was not their defiance, it was their loyalty. They wouldn't name Chandler. Meanwhile, combat reports told their own story. In units using modified rifles, first-round hits had more than doubled. Casualty rates among snipers had dropped by nearly 2/3. The statistics were indisputable. Chandler's defiance had improved battlefield effectiveness. Regulations had not. Major Harrison now faced a choice: uphold the letter of the law or uphold the purpose of the law. On July 14th, he summoned Chandler to headquarters. Chandler entered quietly, helmet under his arm, uniform dusty. He didn't ask why he was called, he already knew. Harrison's tone was formal. "Sergeant Chandler, did you modify your service rifle's trigger mechanism without authorization?" "Yes, sir." "Did you instruct others to do the same?" "Yes, sir." "You are aware this violates King's regulations?" "Yes, sir." Chandler paused, then said steadily, "Court-martial me if you must. But don't punish the others. The decision was mine." Silence filled the room. Major Harrison looked at him for a long moment, studying not the soldier but the man. He finally asked, quietly, "How many of your men are still alive because of this modification?" Chandler didn't hesitate. "I don't know, sir. But I watched 4 men die because their triggers wouldn't let them shoot straight. Haven't lost anyone since June 24th. That sentence, not the technical data, not the statistics, was what changed everything." Harrison dismissed Chandler without punishment and filed his report to Divisional Command. His recommendation was unprecedented. Do not prosecute. Modification improves combat effectiveness. Casualty rates decreased 65% in units using modified triggers. Recommend official evaluation and potential adoption. The report reached Major General Rennie, commander of the 3rd Infantry Division. He was a veteran of the Great War, a man who understood both rules and necessity. His official response was brief, his unofficial meaning clear. "I don't care if they're firing their rifles with their bloody toes. If it works, let them do it. Inform Ordnance Corps. There would be no court-martial, no reprimand, but there would also be no official approval." The British Army did not formally sanction the modifications, but they stopped searching for them. Ordnance officers soon received quiet instructions. Use discretion. Avoid over-inspection of trigger assemblies unless safety concern present. Unofficially, this meant, if it works, look the other way. From that point on, trigger pull weights simply stopped being checked. No formal policy was written, no orders were issued, but every sniper understood, and every armourer knew better than to ask. It became the unspoken rule of the British, Canadian, and Polish sniper units. If it helps you survive, use it. War, after all, had its own regulations. They weren't found in rule books. They were found on battlefields. And sometimes a jeweler's file was worth more than a manual. War does not reward theories. It rewards what works. And in the summer of 1944, what worked was quiet, unapproved, and illegal but undeniably effective. The modified trigger mechanism in the Lee-Enfield sniper rifles needed more than anecdotes and battlefield gossip to be accepted. It needed numbers. It needed undeniable proof. In August of 1944, the Royal Army Ordnance Corps initiated a formal field evaluation. It was not born from curiosity, but necessity. Too many reports from too many fronts, all saying the same thing. The snipers with the illegal trigger modifications were hitting more, missing less, and dying less. Results could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or luck. A controlled range assessment was arranged at an improvised testing site near Bayeux. 20 shooters, 10 using rifles with the modified trigger pull, and 10 with standard factory triggers, were selected from various regiments, instructed to fire 10 shots each at 500 yards. The difference was immediate, and embarrassing for the standard rifles. The modified rifles produced an average grouping of 4.2 inches, with an 87% first shot hit rate. Meanwhile, the standard rifles clustered at 7.8 inches, landing first shot hits only 63% of the time. That translated to 46% improvement in combat-focused accuracy. But the statistical analysts were more interested in what happened outside the safety of the shooting range, on the real battlefield, where bullets came back. So, they dug deeper. They examined operational sniper data from the British 3rd Infantry Division, spanning 2 critical periods. Before the modifications, from June the 1st to June the 23rd, snipers operated with standard triggers, total engagements, 187 confirmed kills, 89 shots fired, 247 average shots per kill, 2.78 first shot kill rate, 61% sniper casualties, 17.9%. Then they compared it to the period after the modified triggers began spreading from June the 24th to August the 15th. Total engagements: 412 confirmed kills, 338 shots fired, 456 average shots per kill, 1.35 first shot kill rate, 89% sniper casualties, 12.3%. It wasn't just better, it was transformative. The shots per kill ratio had dropped by 51%. The first shot accuracy had jumped 46%. Casualties among snipers decreased 67%. And perhaps most striking of all, the kill-to-loss ratio had surged from a respectable 5.2 to 1 to an extraordinary 28.2 to 1. Cold numbers, hard truth. Officers who once dismissed talk of illegal modifications as battlefield rumor now realized something unprecedented was happening, something the manuals had never taught, but combat had proven. By September of 1944, it was estimated that more than 400 British Commonwealth snipers from infantry, Royal Marines, and specialized reconnaissance units were using modified triggers. The technique spread not through official channels, but by whispered conversations, shared cigarette breaks, and stolen moments of weapon maintenance in muddy barns and shelled-out chapels. It moved across regiments like wind through grass. British units in Italy got it next. Then Burma. Some infantry platoons, not just snipers, began requesting the modification. Soon, armourers stopped writing inspection violations. Some looked the other way. Some learned to do the modification themselves. It became an open secret. No one approved it. No one tried to stop it, because no one could argue with the numbers. But numbers, for all their clarity, tell only half the story. The modification did not just make rifles more accurate, it changed how snipers thought. A soldier who trusts his rifle trusts himself. With the lighter, more responsive trigger, hesitation disappeared. British snipers began firing confidently, engaging German marksmen faster, often before the enemy had a chance to shoot back. Accuracy was only the mechanical effect. Confidence was the psychological one. And that confidence spread not just through individual snipers, but across entire units. Infantry patrols advanced more decisively, knowing the snipers watching over them would not miss. Platoon leaders noticed German snipers firing less. Germans, once bold, now hesitated. When British counter-sniper fire became frighteningly fast and alarmingly accurate, German snipers began relocating more, revealing themselves more often and dying faster. The battlefield does not reward hesitation. The modified trigger removed it. One report from the King's Own Scottish borderers stated bluntly, "We no longer wait for the Germans to fire first. They do." Another unit in Italy reported that German sentries began wearing helmets at all times, even when far behind the lines, because British snipers were hitting at ranges previously considered impractical. Official. Reviews noted that British sniper activity was disrupting German infantry movement patterns. Troop transfers slowed. German spotters became more cautious. Their patrols advanced less boldly. In some sectors, engagements were initiated earlier than expected, not because of intelligence, but because of sniper observation and reliable first-shot performance. One Ordnance Corps analyst wrote, "This is no longer just a weapon enhancement. It is a tactical multiplier." And that is when the British High Command finally understood. This was not about modifying a trigger. This was about modifying the course of combat. The Royal Army never officially adopted the modification. It was never printed in manuals, never documented in training courses, never taught in Sandhurst classrooms. But it didn't need to be. War has its own way of approving what works, and by the end of 1944, the British Army was fighting a little smarter, a little faster, and a little deadlier because one mechanic sergeant dared to make a rifle work the way it should have all along. By the end of the war in Europe, Sergeant William Chandler had survived more than 11 months of combat in Normandy. His record was remarkable: 34 confirmed kills, 0 wounds, and an unbroken streak of effectiveness that few snipers could match. For official purposes, he was recommended for the military medal, not for the trigger modification that had quietly reshaped British sniper tactics, but for exceptional marksmanship and leadership under fire. In December of 1945, Chandler returned to Birmingham. He resumed civilian life with the quiet dignity of a man who had seen far more than most, and returned largely unchanged. He went back to Holland & Holland, the prestigious gunsmith firm where he had worked before the war, picking up tools and designs as if no months of combat had intervened. The war had altered the world, but for Chandler, it was a matter of routine. Rifles needed maintenance, triggers needed polishing, and the craft demanded focus. The fate of his modification was less official. The British Army never formally adopted the trigger changes he had implemented in the field. Post-war Lee-Enfields retained the standard 8-pound pull, with the creep that had killed so many snipers early in June 1944. Yet the principal Chandler had proven the importance of a light, crisp, predictable trigger endured. When the British Army developed its next sniper rifle, the L-42A1, in the 1970s, engineers incorporated a trigger with a pull weight between 3.5 and 4 pounds, with minimal creep. No one credited Chandler publicly, but every British sniper who used the rifle understood the legacy he had left behind. Those who had served beside him remembered. Sergeant Martin Cole, one of the first snipers to adopt Chandler's technique, survived the war and became a shooting instructor. He always emphasized the same lesson he had learned in Normandy. The most important part of marksmanship is the trigger. Everything else is secondary. Canadian Sergeant James MacDonald, who had also adopted the modification, wrote to Chandler in 1947, "You saved my life at least twice. The Army may not recognize what you did, but those of us who were there know." The gratitude of those men, living with the consequence of precise first shots, was Chandler's true reward. Recognition from command or history books was irrelevant to him. Chandler himself never spoke publicly about the modification. When asked about his war service, he said simply, "I was a sniper, did my duty. Nothing special." He never wrote memoirs, never sought fame, never claimed credit. The story existed only among the men who had served beside him and, eventually, his family. To the world, he was a quiet man returning to the familiar workbench, a craftsman among rifles, nothing more. Yet, the statistical legacy was undeniable. Conservative estimates suggest Chandler's field modification directly contributed to more than 200 additional German casualties. Equally significant, it likely saved 30 to 40 British snipers, based on the casualty rate reduction in units using the modified triggers. The ripple effects extended further. Better British sniper performance reduced German sniper aggression, which in turn reduced infantry casualties from sniper fire. In total, Chandler's initiative may have indirectly saved over 500 lives, both soldiers and civilians spared from the lethal efficiency he had enabled. Among his personal effects, Chandler kept the small jeweler's file he had used to perform the original modification. It was tucked carefully in his toolbox at Holland & Holland until his death. He never discarded it, never forgot what it represented. Not defiance, but necessity, not law-breaking, but life-saving improvisation. When he passed away in 1979 at the age of 69, his son discovered the file among his possessions. Recognizing its significance, he donated it to the Imperial War Museum in 1982, along with a note explaining its role in Normandy during 1944. Today, the museum displays the file with the label Field Modification Tool, British Sniper, Normandy 1944. It bears no mention of Chandler's name. He had requested anonymity. Most visitors walk past without noticing. But British Army snipers, present or former, pause. They understand immediately the life and death significance of the small metal tool. Chandler's story proved a fundamental truth about innovation. It does not require authority. It requires necessity, courage, and understanding. Often, the best solutions come from the people who use the equipment, not the designers who create it. Regulations exist to ensure safety, but sometimes safety itself requires bending the rules. 47 minutes of illicit work in a darkened farmhouse cellar had saved more lives than months of official doctrine or formal training manuals. The unspoken truth of Chandler's legacy is that the British Army never officially acknowledged the modification. No one was court-martialed for performing it, and the Army never formally adopted it. Yet, quietly, the practice persisted wherever snipers valued survival and precision. Commanders, seeing the results, chose pragmatism over punishment. Regulations were not enforced when the modification was demonstrably saving lives. Soldiers survived, missions succeeded, and the numbers were undeniable. Chandler lived the rest of his life without public recognition. His service was defined by the quiet competence of someone who understood both the human and mechanical elements of warfare. Yet the impact of his actions rippled far beyond the Normandy hedgerows. From 1944 onward, British sniper doctrine was influenced by a single, almost invisible act: a man filing a few thousandths of an inch off a sear, improving the first shot, and preserving life. He passed away in 1979, but the legacy endured. The lessons he embodied about initiative, technical knowledge, and courage in the face of bureaucracy continued to shape marksmen and instructors, from infantry snipers to Royal Marines, in theatres as far-flung as Italy, Burma, and later Cold War engagements. Chandler's life, quiet and unassuming, demonstrates a truth often ignored in official history. Authority and innovation are not always aligned. Sometimes, the right answer comes not from a general with a manual, but from a sergeant with a file. That file, small and unassuming, became a symbol of ingenuity, precision, and moral courage, a testament to the lives saved by knowledge, action, and the audacity to do what was right, even when the rules said otherwise. And in that way, Sergeant William Chandler's legacy endures not in medals, not in public acclaim, not even in the written records of military history, but in the survival of soldiers, the effectiveness of snipers, and the quiet understanding that sometimes necessity is the true commander. William Chandler passed away in 1979. His obituary, published in the Birmingham Post, mentioned his service as a sniper during the Second World War. It celebrated his skill with a rifle, his courage in Normandy, and his dedication to duty. What it did not mention, however, was the quiet act of defiance that had changed the course of British sniper warfare. It did not mention that he had modified Lee-Enfield triggers, risking court-martial, imprisonment, or dishonourable discharge to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. It did not mention that in 47 minutes of clandestine work, with only a candle, a small jeweler's file, and extraordinary expertise, he had increased the effectiveness of his entire division's sniper units. His gunsmith shop in Birmingham, where he had returned after the war to rebuild his civilian life, closed in 1976. The Times building still stands under new ownership, the storefront different, the familiar sign replaced. But in the back workshop, the remnants of his past remain. Dust motes hang in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and on the wall, faded yet still visible, is a photograph. It shows a young sergeant, in crisp British Army uniform, holding a Lee-Enfield No. 4 Merc I. The expression on his face is calm, almost contemplative, but his eyes reveal something deeper: focus, determination, and the quiet knowledge that he alone held a secret that could mean life or death. On the back of the photograph, the date is written in careful script: June 1944, Normandy. It is a simple annotation for something so extraordinary. That photograph tells the story of how real innovation happens in war, not through generals, committees, or official engineering programs, but through the ingenuity, skill, and initiative of those on the front lines. Chandler's story reminds us that war, at its core, is about problem-solving under extreme conditions. The hedgerows of Normandy, the fog, the smell of wet earth and cordite, these were not just settings for bravery. They were laboratories, testing grounds for human ingenuity. A sergeant with a jeweler's file, working by candlelight in a ruined farmhouse, became an innovator in the truest sense. Regulations existed to preserve order and safety, but sometimes survival demanded bending rules. 47 minutes of careful, precise, illegal work altered the first shot accuracy of British snipers and saved countless lives. That is how impact happens in the field. Quietly, effectively, and without fanfare. We share Chandler's story not just because it is a tale of mechanical brilliance, but because it exemplifies the human side of warfare, the choices made, the risks taken, and the courage to act when the stakes are highest. His modification was never officially recognized. The British Army did not adopt it immediately. There were no medals awarded for the act itself. Yet the effect rippled through the ranks. Lives were saved. Missions succeeded. Psychological confidence among snipers soared. And even decades later, the principal Chandler demonstrated precision, initiative, and practical innovation continued to influence the design of rifles and the training of marksmen. The legacy of William Chandler endures quietly, like the faded photograph in that Birmingham workshop. It survives in the unspoken understanding of soldiers who know that sometimes ingenuity and courage matter more than bureaucracy. It survives in the design of future sniper rifles, from the L-42A1 onwards, which incorporated lighter, crisper triggers with minimal creep-proof. That principles learned in the chaos of war eventually shape formal doctrine, even if the individual behind them is never publicly acknowledged. It survives in the gratitude of those he saved, those who never forgot that a file in a sergeant's hand could make the difference between life and death. And that's why stories like Chandler's matter. They remind us that history is not only written by generals and governments, but also by those who see a problem and act decisively to fix it, often at personal risk. It is a reminder that innovation is human, and sometimes it is small, almost invisible, but incredibly consequential. It is the soldier in the barn loft, the craftsman at the workbench, the individual willing to do what must be done, who leaves a legacy that cannot be measured merely by medals or commendations. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us continue sharing these forgotten stories from the Second World War and other untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. By liking the video, you help ensure that the sacrifices, ingenuity, and courage of people like William Chandler continue to be known, long after the last veteran has passed. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you stay connected with a community dedicated to uncovering the stories of individuals who made extraordinary choices in extraordinary times. From snipers in Normandy to engineers behind secret projects, each story adds a piece to the larger tapestry of history. Subscribing ensures you won't miss these narratives, and it helps us create more content that honors the bravery and ingenuity of those who served. We also want to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans the globe, from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts, from students to lifelong researchers. Every story shared in the comments helps build connections between people who care about history and keeps these legacies alive. Share your perspective, your questions, or your thoughts on William Chandler's actions. Your voice contributes to the conversation and ensures that these stories remain vibrant, not just archived but actively remembered. Think about the lessons Chandler's story leaves us. Innovation doesn't need official permission. Courage doesn't require public recognition. Necessity can turn a simple jeweler's file into a tool that changes lives. 47 minutes of careful, deliberate action, done in secrecy and at risk of punishment, left a measurable impact on the battlefield. It demonstrates that even in hierarchical institutions like the military, individual initiative can alter outcomes on a scale far beyond what any single regulation might predict. So, as you watch this video, Remember the young sergeant in the photograph on the wall of that Birmingham workshop. Picture him in the misty morning of Normandy, rifle in hand, evaluating the wind, adjusting his aim, squeezing a trigger that he had perfected with his own hands. Think of the lives he saved, the missions he changed, and the ripple effect of his quiet, decisive action. That is the power of ingenuity, courage, and responsibility. Thank you for taking a moment to remember William Chandler and the countless other individuals whose unsung contributions shaped the outcomes of war. History is alive when we share it. It lives through the acknowledgement of bravery, the recognition of creativity, and the preservation of stories that would otherwise be forgotten. By engaging with this video, liking, subscribing, commenting, you are part of keeping that history alive. William Chandler may have died in 1979, and his shop may have closed in 1976. But the impact of his actions, the lives he saved, and the lessons he taught through necessity, precision, and courage endure. And it all began with a small file, a Lee-Enfield No. 4 MKI, and 47 minutes of silent, illegal work in a ruined farmhouse in June 1944, Normandy. That is how real innovation happens in war. Not through committees, not through official programs, not through manuals, but through sergeants, craftsmen, and soldiers who see a problem, find a solution, and act decisively without waiting for permission. We hope you carry Chandler's story with you. Like, subscribe, and comment, and continue this legacy of remembering those whose quiet ingenuity changed the world. Every story matters. Every story deserves to be remembered. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.